When William and Catherine stepped into the press room with steely faces and fire in their eyes, no one could have predicted the words that would follow a radical announcement that left even the Queen's portrait shaking on the walls. The room was thick with tension, 100 flashbulbs crackling as the couple moved to the podium. It wasn't just another royal address. The atmosphere told everyone present that history was about to be rewritten. Journalists, caught between fascination and dread, noted the sharp angles of William's jaw, the way his hands gripped the sides of the lectern. At his side, Catherine stood tall, her eyes shimmering not with fear but with unmistakable defiance. The royal couple had called this emergency press conference without explanation or approval from the palace. No aides had briefed the journalists, no schedule had been distributed, just an abrupt summons to appear. Rumors had already been swirling after their conspicuous absence from several public engagements earlier in the week, but no one dared imagine what was about to unfold. Catherine's glances at William spoke volumes. They were aligned, united, and ready to confront the invisible forces that had kept them quiet for so long. When William leaned into the microphone, the entire room fell into an expectant hush. His voice, calm but edged with restrained fury, cut through the silence like a blade. "We have decided," he began, letting the words linger ominously in the air. At once, the press erupted into a chaotic din, cameras flashing wildly, reporters shouting questions that neither William nor Catherine acknowledged. The phrase alone was a provocation, one that suggested not only defiance but finality. There would be no walking this back. What stunned everyone even more was the royal family's palpable absence. Not a single senior royal had appeared at the conference, not even to lend an air of solidarity. Instead, it was William and Catherine, standing alone, the weight of 1,000 years of tradition pressing down on them. Yet, if they felt the pressure, they refused to show it. Catherine placed a hand on the lectern next to William's, her posture daring anyone to challenge her place at his side. Speculation erupted almost instantly. Was this an abdication, a divorce, a public rebellion against the throne? Some even whispered that the monarchy itself might be collapsing before their eyes. Every theory seemed more outrageous than the last, but in that electric moment, nothing felt impossible. As the couple exchanged a final, knowing glance before leaving the podium without answering a single question, the media frenzy reached a fever pitch. Even as their figures disappeared behind the heavy velvet curtains, the press continued shouting, their voices rising in panic and confusion. Catherine's defiance glimmered one last time as she glanced over her shoulder, eyes blazing like someone who had nothing left to lose. But behind those simple 3 words lay months of secret battles, betrayal, and sleepless nights events the public was never meant to know. The story didn't start at the podium. It started behind locked doors, where whispered arguments and shattered trust turned William and Catherine from heirs into rebels. Long before the cameras captured their defiance, the palace walls had already absorbed countless nights of muffled confrontations and cold silences that spoke louder than any words. The tension between them and the senior royals had been growing like an unstoppable storm, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Each passing day seemed to draw sharper lines between tradition and progress, between duty and personal conviction, until even the air inside the palace felt thick with resentment. It began with Catherine's quiet but deliberate attempts to modernize royal traditions. She had hoped to bring light into the dark corners of an institution that clung desperately to its centuries-old rituals. Her proposals, small changes at first, more humane protocols, transparent charities, approachable public appearances, were met with polite smiles that quickly hardened into disapproval. Time and again she was told, "This is not how it's done," until the words became weapons, bruising her spirit but never breaking her resolve. Those who once welcomed her warmth now whispered that she was overstepping, daring too much. Meanwhile, William found himself caught between loyalty to his father and an unshakable duty to his wife and children. He argued with Charles repeatedly over finances, accusing him and Camilla of extravagance and secrecy when the nation suffered. William demanded a more honest accounting of the crown's money, pushing back against projects that he saw as outdated displays of privilege. The friction only deepened when Camilla took it upon herself to cut Catherine out of certain key events, quietly banning her from gatherings where she feared Catherine's presence might overshadow her own. In private, Catherine confided to close friends that she felt trapped in a beautiful cage, but she also confessed something darker. She was ready to fight, no matter the cost. Queen Elizabeth, though outwardly restrained, was said to have watched the unfolding rebellion with quiet disappointment. She had once believed William would inherit not just the throne but also her sense of duty to preserve the sanctity of the institution at all costs. But as she observed him take Catherine's hand and stand firm against her own son, it became clear to her that the boy she had once adored had grown into a man with dangerous convictions. William and Catherine had begun skipping family dinners, declining invitations, and appearing less and less at events carefully orchestrated to reinforce unity. Rumors swirled that even inside their own home, staff chose sides in hushed tones, knowing a rupture was inevitable. And yet, the royal family underestimated the depth of William and Catherine's resolve. Every insult, every restriction, every icy glance only fueled their determination to carve out a different future. Together, in the shadows of the palace, they started to draft something extraordinary. One quiet conversation at a time, one clandestine meeting after another. What the royal family didn't know was that William and Catherine were quietly crafting a plan, one that would upend everything the crown stood for. Long after the lights went out at Buckingham, secret meetings unfolded in hidden rooms, where William and Catherine dared to conspire against the throne they were destined to inherit. The quiet halls of the palace may have been silent, but beyond its reach, a rebellion was stirring. Determined to shield their vision from watchful eyes and prying ears, they began meeting trusted advisors far from royal grounds. These encounters, planned in the dead of night and executed with surgical precision, would become the foundation of a plan so radical it could tear the monarchy apart. To outmaneuver the sprawling surveillance web woven into their daily lives, William and Catherine resorted to methods unheard of within royal circles. They used burner phones procured through intermediaries, leaving no trace of their conversations. At times, they even donned disguises to slip unnoticed into private residences and secluded country houses, where they could speak freely without fear of interception. These clandestine tactics became their lifeline, allowing them to discuss their ambitions and grievances with people who dared to tell them the truth rather than the polished lies of the palace. What began as quiet consultations with a handful of loyal advisors quickly escalated into something far larger. Invitations went out to high-profile modern leaders, innovators, and activists who had challenged convention in their own fields, business magnates who had dismantled rigid hierarchies, artists who had defied censorship, even former political dissidents known for exposing government secrets. They came to these secret meetings not out of curiosity but because William and Catherine presented them with something irresistible: the chance to reshape one of the oldest and most impenetrable institutions on earth. It wasn't just outsiders who saw merit in their cause. Catherine, recognizing the loneliness of her position, reached out to Princess Anne in a moment of desperation. That meeting, held in hushed tones in a darkened wing of Windsor, revealed cracks in the royal facade no one expected. Anne, long regarded as the monarchy's unyielding enforcer, surprised everyone when she allegedly offered her quiet support, whispering that perhaps it was finally time someone challenged the way things had always been. This flicker of solidarity gave Catherine a strength she hadn't known she possessed. Yet their growing confidence invited danger. A note, believed to have been leaked by Charles himself, arrived without warning, its message simple yet chilling. There will be dire consequences if this continues. That thinly veiled threat only deepened William's resolve. But it broke something in Catherine. Later that night, in the privacy of their quarters, she wept as she vowed to William, "I will protect my children from this cage at any cost." Her voice was steady, but her tears betrayed how much the battle was already wearing her down. But as their plans gained momentum, the walls began closing in, and someone inside the palace would stop at nothing to expose them. Just when they thought they could trust their closest allies, William and Catherine discovered the knife was already in their backs. The very people they had led into their confidence, those they believed shared their vision, had been quietly feeding whispers to the press. The betrayal came suddenly, a tabloid headline one morning screaming with insinuations and half-truths that left the couple reeling. "William and Catherine plot monarchy overhaul in secret," read one front page, accompanied by breathless speculation about their motives, suggesting a bitter power struggle and hinting at schemes to dethrone his father. The details were partial, disjointed just enough to wound, but not enough to explain. Within hours of the papers hitting the streets, chaos swept through the palace. Staff murmured behind closed doors, phones rang incessantly, and the corridors buzzed with suspicion. Every word printed stung like salt in an open wound. Catherine felt her stomach twist as she read claims that painted her not as a reformer, but as a manipulator, who accused her of steering William away from his royal duties for her own ambition. Worse, private details, things only an insider could have known, were quoted verbatim. The sanctuary they thought they'd built was nothing but a stage already crawling with spies. The headlines forced Charles to act swiftly. That evening, he summoned William to an emergency meeting in one of the palace's grandest rooms. But grandeur only amplified the humiliation. In front of senior staff, Charles reportedly unleashed a tirade, his voice echoing off the high ceilings, as he accused William of bringing shame upon the crown. He demanded to know what they had been planning, why they had dared to keep him in the dark. William, usually composed even in conflict, could only grit his teeth as his father's fury rained down on him. Yet it was Catherine who bore the sharpest accusation, Charles allegedly spitting out that she had poisoned William's mind with her reckless modernist ideals. The situation escalated further when another cruel twist arrived. Private texts between Catherine and Princess Anne mysteriously surfaced in the media. The messages, which were taken out of context, made it seem as if Anne had been conspiring with Catherine to undermine the Queen's authority. This public leak not only endangered Anne's fragile support, but deepened the perception of rebellion. Catherine was devastated to see her trust betrayed so publicly, her personal thoughts weaponized against her. As suspicion spread like wildfire, William decided to confront the betrayal head-on. He arranged a private meeting with the one person he believed had access to all their plans, a lifelong friend who had been at his side since childhood. That encounter exploded into rage and heartbreak as William demanded the truth, only to see the guilt written plainly on his friend's face. The room shook with the weight of accusations, the air thick with decades of friendship torn to shreds. This betrayal only hardened their resolve and set the stage for the most shocking move yet. In a stunning interview, just days before the big reveal, Catherine bared her soul to a trusted journalist, and what she said left the world in tears. For months, she had been painted by the tabloids as calculating, ambitious, even cold. But as she sat across from the interviewer, her voice breaking and her words halting, that carefully constructed image crumbled into something far more human. Catherine admitted she had cried every night for months, feeling powerless in a world that demanded her silence while punishing her every attempt to speak. The palace, she said, had become a beautiful prison, and her role in it was no longer a privilege, but a sentence she couldn't bear. She revealed that she had seriously considered leaving the royal family entirely more than once. There were nights when she packed bags in her mind, rehearsed goodbyes, and imagined what life would feel like away from the suffocating expectations. But each time, she stayed for her children, unwilling to let them grow up as pawns in a war they didn't choose. They deserve parents who will fight, she explained tearfully, not ones who run. This quiet resolve had kept her standing even as the walls closed in around her. Her confession turned even more haunting when she spoke of Diana. Catherine admitted she was haunted by the late princess's fate, unable to shake the thought that history was trying to repeat itself through her. "I see her every time I walk into those rooms," she said, her hands trembling, "and I refuse to let that happen to me." That declaration carried more weight than anyone had expected, a chilling reminder of how fragile even the most glamorous lives could be. Then came the moment no one could have foreseen. Catherine hinted at what many had only dared to speculate: an irreconcilable rift between herself and Camilla. Though she stopped short of naming names outright, her meaning was clear. She spoke of betrayals cloaked in politeness, of being shut out of decisions, and of being treated as an outsider in a family she was supposed to call her own. The thinly veiled reference sent shockwaves through the nation, fueling speculation that the divide was deeper and darker than anyone had imagined. Through tears, Catherine delivered her most unforgettable line: "It's either the crown as it was, or the future we deserve." Those words hung in the air, heavy and final, a declaration that felt as much like a battle cry as a plea for mercy. Somewhere off camera, it was reported that William, who had insisted on being present during the interview, wiped away his own tears as he listened to his wife speak. For the first time in public, their pain and determination intertwined, laying bare just how high the stakes truly were. The public now hung on every word, but the royal family's fury only deepened, and then came the final blow. In a chilling display of old-world power, the Queen summoned her grandson and his wife for a private audience, a meeting no one dared speak of afterward. The summons arrived without ceremony, but carried the weight of a royal command that neither William nor Catherine could refuse. When they entered the room, the air was heavy with unspoken judgment. The Queen seated in silence, her expression as unreadable as stone. She let them stand there for a moment, the quiet stretching unbearably, before finally motioning for them to speak. But when William began explaining their position carefully at first, then with growing resolve, her face betrayed no reaction at all. Every word seemed to dissolve into the cold stillness of her gaze. Her silence was not passive, but deliberate, almost cruel. It forced William and Catherine to fill the space with their justifications, their pleas for understanding, their vision of a modern monarchy that could better serve its people. But the Queen did not interrupt, nor did she appear moved. Instead, when the last of William's words faded into the room, she simply leaned back and delivered a veiled threat that struck deeper than any outright condemnation. Their titles and privileges, she said in measured tones, could be stripped immediately should they continue down this path. The implication was clear: they would not only lose their status, but also be cut off from the institution that defined them. The silence that followed was broken only by Catherine, who spoke softly but with undeniable defiance, repeating her conviction that their actions were for the good of the family and the nation. But the Queen's icy retort shattered what little composure Catherine had left. "You don't belong here," she reportedly said, her words sharp and final. That single phrase drove Catherine to tears as she turned away, her strength momentarily undone by the weight of rejection from the very woman whose approval she had once craved. What followed next would not be forgotten. When the meeting ended, William stood and, breaking centuries of protocol, refused to bow. It was a quiet act of rebellion, but it spoke louder than any words he could have uttered. The tension crackled so fiercely that Princess Anne, who had been watching from the shadows of the room, reportedly stepped forward to intervene. She, more than anyone, understood the danger of pushing too far, and her presence may have been the only thing that stopped the Queen from banishing them outright in that moment. Before dismissing them, the Queen delivered one final, eerie warning, her voice colder than ever. "If you cross this line, there is no return." Those words hung in the air long after they left, echoing like a prophecy of doom. And yet, even this final warning could not stop the storm that was already building outside the palace gates. When William and Catherine finally unveiled the full scope of their radical plan, the world erupted in chaos, and the royal family was left scrambling for control. Standing before a sea of cameras, their voices unshaken, they declared what no heir and consort had dared to say aloud in 1,000 years. William began by outlining a sweeping modernization of the monarchy, one that stunned even his fiercest supporters. He announced they would step back from certain royal duties deemed ceremonial or outdated, relinquish millions in taxpayer funds that had long fueled the monarchy's lavish lifestyle, and open the institution to unprecedented transparency. Every word seemed to shatter another layer of tradition, leaving a shocked silence in its wake before the crowd outside roared in response. But Catherine was not content to let William bear the burden alone. With calm ferocity, she declared that she would personally champion issues long ignored by the palace, even if it meant breaking with royal protocols. She vowed to stand alongside marginalized communities, speak on matters the family had long avoided, and use her platform, not for quiet patronage, but for visible, tangible change. Her words sparked applause among many but ignited fury in others who saw her determination as insolence. The reaction was immediate and ferocious. Outside royal residences, massive protests erupted, supporters of the couple holding signs that read, "The future is now," while furious loyalists chanted demands for their resignation. The once united crowds that typically gathered for royal celebrations had split, as if the entire country had been forced to choose a side overnight. Among the younger, more progressive generation, there was jubilation and defiance, while the staunch traditionalists spoke of betrayal and the collapse of dignity. Neither side was willing to stand down, and clashes in the streets underscored just how deeply the monarchy's fault lines had been exposed. Inside the palace, the rebellion struck even harder. In a move as shocking as the announcement itself, a group of senior staff staged a symbolic walkout, marching silently from their posts as cameras flashed. Their departure was a quiet but unmistakable condemnation, a statement that they refused to serve a crown led by those who defied its sacred rules. The press wasted no time capturing the chaos, with headlines like "The House Divided" and "The Crowquake" dominating airwaves. Every station replayed the announcement on a loop, commentators alternating between disbelief and outrage, while others hailed it as the beginning of a long-overdue revolution. The term, "the crown quake," quickly took hold, a word that captured the sense of tectonic upheaval coursing through both the palace and the nation. But just when it seemed the dust might settle, a shocking secret buried deep within the palace threatened to bring the entire monarchy to its knees. Buried within centuries-old royal charters lies a clause so damning that even William and Catherine's bold stand could collapse under its weight. In the chaos that followed their unprecedented announcement, whispers began to surface about an ancient provision tucked deep within the monarchy's legal framework, a relic of control, written to crush defiance before it could take root. According to this obscure clause, any heir who explicitly rejected their traditional obligations forfeited their claim to the throne entirely. It was a brutal and elegant weapon, crafted long ago to protect the monarchy from precisely the kind of rebellion now shaking its foundations. The discovery sent shockwaves through both camps. Lawyers from each side scrambled to interpret its meaning, their frantic arguments spilling into the corridors of the palace. William's advisors insisted the clause was ceremonial at best, outdated and unenforceable. But Charles's team argued it was binding, and worse, that the Queen herself had quietly reaffirmed its legitimacy years earlier. Overnight, the conflict shifted from political to existential, no longer about reform, but about survival itself. Behind closed doors, Charles allegedly threatened to invoke the clause publicly, stripping William of his claim and branding his rebellion as nothing more than treason wrapped in modern rhetoric. The threat was delivered coldly, reportedly during a late-night phone call, with Charles leaving no doubt that he was prepared to act if William pushed further. For Catherine, the idea that everything they had fought for could be erased with the stroke of a pen was unthinkable. But rather than retreat, she reportedly began drafting a fiery legal response, challenging the clause's validity and accusing the crown of hiding behind a ghost from another century to silence progress. The stakes escalated when yet another devastating leak to the press claimed the Queen herself had signed papers weeks before the announcement, readying the family for this exact confrontation. The timing of the leak was no accident. It landed just as public opinion began to waver, sowing doubt about whether William and Catherine's stand had ever truly stood a chance. Still, neither of them flinched. William, according to those closest to him, pounded his fist against the table and declared through gritted teeth, "We won't be erased." Those 5 words reverberated not only through the palace but through a nation now riveted by the spectacle of a family at war with itself. And as the family fractured beyond repair, whispers began about a final reckoning no one could have predicted. As the sun set over Windsor Castle, the royal family gathered one final time not to heal, but to decide the fate of the monarchy itself. For the first time in living memory, every senior royal was present. Even those who had remained silent until now, Princess Beatrice and Eugenie among them, were summoned to witness the reckoning. The atmosphere was suffocating, the stakes higher than ever, as centuries of tradition collided with the unstoppable force of William and Catherine's defiance. Every word spoken that evening would echo far beyond the castle walls. William stood first, his voice steady but his eyes blazing with conviction. He laid out his vision with unflinching clarity, daring the family to stop him. He painted a future where the monarchy was stripped of its unnecessary opulence and repurposed as a force for good, transparent, humble, relevant. His speech was equal parts proposal and provocation, each sentence crafted to cut through the silence and leave no doubt where he stood. His final words were not a plea but a challenge. "We cannot survive by clinging to ghosts." Catherine followed, but her tone was softer and more personal, yet no less devastating. She turned directly to the Queen, her voice breaking as she invoked Diana's name. With tears, she refused to hide. She spoke of the pain she had endured, how she had seen herself walking the same lonely corridors Diana once walked, hearing the same whispered judgments, feeling the same cold isolation. She pleaded not only for herself, but for the children who would inherit whatever decision was made that night. "You told me once this family was a duty," she said quietly. "I believed you. But what good is duty if it destroys everyone who serves it?" Then came Charles. His voice was bitter, edged with fury, his ultimatum stark and unyielding. He warned William that this path led only to exile, formal, permanent, irreparable. His words dripped with disappointment and betrayal, but they carried real threat as well. The tension between father and son reached its peak in that moment, as though the room itself might shatter from the weight of it. But before the damage became irreversible, Anne spoke. Her words silenced everyone. With a tone both fierce and weary, She delivered a stunning speech, urging the family to embrace change rather than destroy itself. She reminded them all of their duty to the people, how clinging to the past would doom them in the eyes of the world. Her voice cut through the noise, bringing clarity to chaos. Finally, the Queen stood. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze swept the room with regal finality. Visibly shaken yet resolute, she uttered the words that would seal the family's fate. "Then so be it, we have decided." But even as the royal family reluctantly endorsed a fractured future, the world wondered, at what cost had William and Catherine won? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.